This exhibition, Beauty and Learning Korean Painted Screens, is currently on in the Korean Gallery on the second floor in the Asian wing. And it focuses on a very distinctive and intriguing genre of Korean arts, painting specifically, known as chekkori, literally books and things, otherwise known as scholars' screens. There are 4 screens brought together for this exhibition, one of which is in the Met's own collection. 3 are on loan from U.S. collections, and this is one of them. All of the screens date to the late 19th into the early 20th century. However, the tradition really first flourished in the late 18th century under the reign of King Chosŏn, who is known as one of 2 Renaissance kings in Chosŏn Korean history. His reign coincided with a period of both cultural and economic florescence. He was a very learned man. He was a bibliophile. He was an accomplished artist himself. And among the paintings or the types or genres of art that he was particularly fond of was this, chekkori, books and things, scholars' screens. And in fact, he's known to have required this type of painting as one of the exam questions for court painters, in selection of court painters. And he's also known to have given specific comments to well-known artists who painted these screens, saying this should be done this way, this looks good, but this should really look like this, and so forth. There's an account, an anecdote in the collection of writings by King Chosŏn, in which one day the king gathered his ministers at the palace. Behind the throne was a screen very much like this one that you see on your screen. Again, this one dates to the late 19th century. And he says to his ministers, "Do you see these books?" And they reply, "Yes." And he says, "How can you think that they are real? They are not real, but painted books." A great scholar once said, "If one enters one's study and touches the books, it lifts or brightens one's mood, even if one cannot read regularly. I have come to understand the true meaning of these words from this painting." Presumably the paintings or the screens of this type that were produced for him and during the reign of King Chosŏn in the 18th century had even more books depicted than even the one that you see here and the ones that are included in the exhibition. Of the extant paintings of this genre, of which there are many, none, as far as I know, can be definitively dated to the 18th century. So most are from the mid-19th century on, and they do continue to be produced today as well. But this particular example, which is from a private collection, a wonderful, vibrant example of this genre, really inherits that court tradition that first began in the 18th century. As you can see, it depicts this illusory bookcase. So this compositional style is often referred to as trompe-l'œil, fool the eye, bookcase with shelves filled to the brim with stacks of books and beautiful objects, including porcelains, bronze vessels, enameled metalwork, curious, somewhat strange objects, plants, and flowers. This is a very distinctive genre within the broader context of East Asia. There's nothing quite like it, either in China or Japan. However, it was probably influenced to some degree by a tradition in China, contemporaneous China, 18th century, contemporaneous to King Chosŏn, under Qianlong, his reign, Emperor Qianlong. They developed a very systematized practice of collecting and displaying objects. This is a large-scale wall cabinet of curios and antiques, so-called treasures, in the imperial palace, the Forbidden City in Beijing. This, however, did not develop into a painting tradition. It really was about actual collecting and then displaying of objects. On the Korean side, now obviously there were interaction between the Qianlong and the Chosŏn court, the Chinese and the Korean courts in the 18th century. So the Korean court and the elites would have been aware of it, and they did import Chinese objects in Korea. But rather than continuing that practice of actual display, they developed it into this very distinctive genre of painting. And the court tradition really also reflects the Western methods of painting or techniques of paintings that had started to be in vogue at this time, such as the sense of three-dimensionality, the illusory space, incorporating multiple vantage points in this particular screen. Books really comprise an important element of this genre of painting because it symbolizes the learning and scholarship that was considered so important for Confucian rulers and the Confucian elite of the time. Presumably during Chungjo's time in the 18th century, we know from written records that the painted books, the depicted books had actual titles written on them, and the screens that were made specifically for the king had titles of books that he specifically enjoyed. The later paintings, all the extant ones from the 19th century and onward, actually don't have any titles depicted on the books. So in some ways, the books themselves have become beautiful decorative objects, and yet at the same time they are there because of their symbolic value of representing learning and scholarship. And in this particular screen, as you can see, the artist has taken extreme care to really render realistically the details of all the objects, including the beautiful fabric bindings on the books. In addition to books, some of the standard elements that appear in these screens are scholarly utensils or paraphernalia, such as brush holder with brushes and rolls of paper, lacquered vessels and metalwork, also fruits and plants, porcelain vases, flowers, and I'll return to these in a moment. This is the second screen in the exhibition. If it seems much smaller on the screen, it actually is in real life. It's about half the size or height of the one that you saw previously, and it continues that same style to employ illusory bookcase, but the composition has become much more streamlined. And the smaller format of screens accommodated their position. That is, they were meant to be placed at the head of a bed that was placed on the floor, more like a futon. And so it was meant to be viewed while you're lying down and creates this very intimate space. Two details from this screen. A vase, a so-called gu-type vase, very standard, again, element that appear in these screens. Coral branches and peacock feathers, exotica, unusual elements, luxurious items. When they are placed together in a vase, it represents wishes for career advancement. Two drawers built into the illusory bookcase, an upside-down fish, presumably not a live or dead fish, but a porcelain vessel imitating a fish. A carp, we're assuming, because carps are auspicious symbols.